On July 30th, 2016, police stormed a house in Yeongju, Gyeongsangbuk-do Province. Inside, they found a 40-year-old man named Park and a woman whose identity remained undisclosed. The primary target of the operation was Park. However, as officers attempted to detain him, the woman beside him stepped forward in his defense. She aggressively pushed the officers away and shouted, "What are you doing in the presence of God? Remove your hands immediately." The mention of God in her outburst left no doubt. She was entirely brainwashed by this self-proclaimed cult leader, Park. Let's go back a year to 2015. At that time, Park had no steady job and was financially dependent on his parents. The reason behind his unemployment lay in his criminal history: 8 convictions that made it nearly impossible for him to secure work. Park's parents, devout Christians, spent their days in church, praying fervently for God to give their son a chance at a new life. It seems their desperation found an unusual outlet. One day, Park began claiming he had received a divine revelation. He started referring to himself as the living God and demanded to be addressed accordingly. This was neither a miracle nor an answer to their prayers, just the product of Park's delusional fantasies. Yet for reasons that defy explanation, his parents soon began to believe him. They genuinely came to see their son as someone imbued with divine power, capable of performing miracles. In their eyes, he ceased to be their son. He became a god. Consumed by this twisted faith, Park's parents went to their church to share the true nature of their son with others. However, most of the congregation, horrified by their claims, dismissed their words outright, labeling the parents as delusional. But among the congregation, there was one person who succumbed to their dangerous rhetoric. It was a 48-year-old woman named Kim. Kim had her own reasons for trusting Park's parents. She had known them for a long time, and during difficult times, they had often helped her with household chores. Over time, a warm, friendly bond had developed between them. Whether out of naivety or lingering gratitude, Kim began supporting Park and even agreed to meet him in person. The self-proclaimed cult leader had already learned everything about her life through his parents. At their meeting, he played the role of an all-knowing deity. "I know everything about you. You are like this, aren't you? And also like that, right?" Kim became yet another victim of Park's deception. She believed every word he said, exclaiming, "Oh God, the Lord himself has descended upon you." Her faith grew stronger with each passing day, as if she had been granted some special gift. According to experts, most cult victims are individuals with dependent personalities. Leaders of such groups skillfully exploit human vulnerability and the deep desire for an unwavering source of support. They begin by offering comfort and instilling confidence, slowly introducing their ideas, and eventually gaining total control. Once a victim reaches this state, breaking free from the cult's influence becomes nearly impossible. This is exactly what happened to Kim. She began to see Park as a god and devoted herself entirely to serving him. However, the guru's influence didn't stop there. Before long, Kim began sharing her newfound faith in Park with her closest family members, her elder sister and younger brother. "God has come to us to save us. We must believe in our leader and find salvation," she would proclaim. The irony of the situation lay in the fact that Kim and her siblings were known to be deeply devout Christians. They believed their lives were part of a divine plan, followed religious teachings, and strove for entry into heaven. Yet despite the strength of their previous faith, it took very little time for them to shift their devotion to Park. This unsettling ease of transition reveals the terrifying power of cult influence. By September 2015, the Kim family's faith in Park had solidified to such an extent that he began taking active steps to exploit them. His first move was to isolate the family from the outside world. For instance, he told Kim, "If you stay with your husband, he will die because of you." These words, spoken with the air of a prophecy, became an unshakable truth for Kim. Terrified, she immediately left her husband. Afterward, she moved into the same house as Park, his wife, her own sister, and Park's parents. Her younger brother, who worked in another city, did not join this strange communal living arrangement, but his connection with the family gradually weakened. Thus began the peculiar shared life of these 6 individuals. It was at this point that Park revealed his true nature. Park completely dominated Kim's sister, turning her life into a nightmare. He not only controlled her every move, but also subjected her to systematic abuse. One of his methods of discipline was depriving her of sleep. He allowed her no more than 2 hours of rest each day, forcing her to spend the remaining hours either listening to his sermons or praying. During his teachings, the women were forced to stand still in a pious posture. If they failed to maintain this position, he accused them of lacking faith or being possessed by Satan. Such accusations were followed by beatings, which grew increasingly brutal. A towering, powerful man, standing 1.80 meters tall and weighing up to 160 kilograms, Park used his fists to strike the women, grabbed them by their hair, and slammed their heads against the walls. His cruelty extended to outright torture. On one occasion, he forced the sisters to sit naked on the blade of a knife, threatening that this would purify their souls. This could not be called teaching or faith. It was pure violence. But Park's crimes did not end there. He established a so-called charitable organization, claiming it was his way of bringing light to the world and spreading faith. In reality, he used the organization as a means to extort money from his followers. While the exact amount he took from the Kim sisters remains unknown, police estimate it exceeded 2 billion won. 2 months of communal living turned into a true hell for Kim and her sister. They endured constant beatings, malnutrition, and sleep deprivation, which led to severe physical and psychological trauma. Their wounds went untreated, resulting in infections and festering. Their bodies became so emaciated that, especially in the case of Kim's sister, weakness reduced her to a state where she could no longer control even her basic bodily functions. And then, on the night of April 11, 2017, tragedy struck. At 2 o'clock in the morning, Park began yet another of his sermons. Present in the room were Kim, her sister, and Park's wife. The sermon dragged on for an unbearable 8 hours. The women stood, trying to endure the torment. But at some point, Kim's sister simply collapsed to the floor. Park exploded with rage. "You? How dare you fall during a sacred sermon? Do you want to live?" he screamed at Kim's unconscious sister, who lay trembling weakly on the floor, unable to respond. Her lack of reaction only fueled his anger further. "Answer me or I'll kill you," he roared, unleashing a torrent of threats. Then he began beating her relentlessly, continuing for an entire hour. The woman lost consciousness, her limp body collapsing to the floor. Yet even this did not stop Park. He ordered his wife and Kim to drag her sister to the bathroom. Terrified, they obeyed. In the bathroom, Park turned on the cold shower and doused her with icy water, occasionally slapping her face. The woman remained unresponsive. Irritated, he muttered, "Apparently I'm not teaching properly," before leaving the bathroom. It seemed the beating had ended, but after some time, Park returned. In his hands were a Hosasan massager and a leather belt. What followed unfolded like a nightmare made real. Park used these items as a whip and a club, continuing his so-called procedure. The torment lasted 6 hours. The woman tried to endure it, but her body could no longer take the abuse. By 3 in the afternoon, her heart had stopped. Park calmly checked to see if she was still alive, and upon confirming her death, made a phone call to her younger brother. "Your sister is dead. You'll need to come tomorrow," he said in a completely emotionless tone. The next day, on April 12, 2017, the brother, along with others, went to meet this monstrous leader. Park's wife and parents arrived at the commune to discuss what had happened. At that moment, Park made a shocking declaration. "This was God's judgment. Your sister has died, but there is no reason to mourn. I can bring her back to life." The absurd statement was accepted as truth by everyone present. To them, Park was a god, and no one had the courage to question his words. The commune had become his personal kingdom, where every word he uttered was treated as law. Park's mother suggested a burial site, in the mountains near Bonghua. The group wasted no time putting the plan into action. Park placed the woman's body in the trunk of a car, and together, his parents, wife, and the deceased woman's brother and sister, they drove to the chosen location. They ventured deep into the mountains and buried the body. Kim, the deceased woman's sister, did not leave Park even after this horrific event. One might think her sister's death would have broken his hold over her, but she remained, continuing to live in the commune. Park's behavior, far from softening, became even more brutal and controlling. He now declared, "Your sister isn't coming back because you're not praying properly. If you were doing it right, she would have already risen. Pray harder." Kim, physically and emotionally exhausted, was gradually losing her strength. Guilt over her sister's death consumed her. She truly believed she was responsible. At the same time, she remained a victim of Park's relentless abuse. Doubts began to creep into her mind, but the realization that everything about this situation was profoundly wrong came too slowly. By the time her awareness started to surface, Park's cruelty and control had reached their peak. Kim increasingly thought about escaping, but fear of Park and his family, who kept her under strict control, prevented her from taking the decisive step. 2 long years passed. In July 2019, Kim finally saw an opportunity to flee. Park, now preoccupied with a new group of female followers, rarely visited the commune, and his grip weakened. On July 6th, Kim made her move. She escaped from the commune. Her first action was to find her brother and persuade him to leave the dangerous place with her. From that moment, their life on the run began. They hid in various locations across Gangwon province, terrified that Park would find them and kill them, just as he had done to their older sister. Each day they changed their lodging, living in constant fear, unable to find peace. Their flight lasted 13 days until they finally felt they had escaped his grasp. It was then that the brother and sister decided to head to Busan to start a new life. Even in Busan, fear and guilt over their sister's death haunted them. Finally, on July 25th, they gathered the courage to go to the police and file a report against Park. Shortly afterward, the police raided the commune, only to find Park still surrounded by his devoted followers. It seemed the truth was on the verge of being revealed, yet Park remained utterly composed, exuding an unnerving calmness. "I just wanted to help these people," Park declared. Then, completely unexpectedly, he accused Kim of murdering her sister. "She killed her sister. I was only trying to cover for her, which is why I helped bury the body. Now she's trying to pin it all on me to save her own skin," he said with unsettling confidence. As Park spoke, his parents, standing nearby, suddenly began backing up his claims, lending their support to his story. Even Park's wife took his side, insisting their guru was innocent and had been falsely accused. However, it wasn't long before police located the buried body in the mountains, and the evidence proving Park's guilt became overwhelming. The investigation conclusively revealed that Park was the murderer. The first court hearing took place on February 1st, 2018. Park was sentenced to 30 years in prison, while his parents and wife, who had helped conceal the body, received 3-year prison terms. Although Kim's brother and sister were recognized as victims, they could not escape punishment for their involvement in hiding the body. They were sentenced to 2 years and 6 months of imprisonment, suspended with a 4-year probation period. However, Park and his family immediately filed an appeal. During the second trial, an unexpected twist occurred. Park's wife suddenly changed her testimony and spoke out against him. She declared that Park was the mastermind, a self-proclaimed guru, and confirmed that he had committed the murder. It seemed that her new testimony would only strengthen the case against Park. But the opposite happened. The appellate court reduced Park's sentence from 30 years to 22 years in prison. The court justified its decision by deeming the murder unintentional and concluded that the original sentence was overly harsh. Additionally, the judges considered Park's alleged remorse as a mitigating factor. This ruling sparked outrage. Given Park's criminal history, which included 8 prior offenses, and the testimony of his own wife, which directly implicated him, many were left questioning, how could such a decision be possible? Did Park truly feel remorse? That remains uncertain. Analyzing the behavior of such gurus, several common traits emerge. Cult leaders possess exceptional oratory skills. They can captivate others with their words, and their charisma draws people in. This enables them to easily manipulate those who are struggling, emotionally vulnerable, or overly naive. Cult victims, on the other hand, are often in dire life situations, both psychologically and financially. Many of them are overly trusting, unaware of the dangers of the world, and inclined to rely on someone they perceive as stronger. It is precisely this dependence that makes them vulnerable to manipulative individuals. **** How to avoid the traps of cults. Asterisk asterisk. Punishing the leaders of such groups is undoubtedly important. However, if they had no followers to begin with, their power would simply vanish. This is why prevention is key. Educating people to critically evaluate those who promise salvation, especially when it involves financial contributions or demands for absolute devotion, is essential. To those watching this video, I want to say, don't let yourself be deceived. Behind the mask of a savior may lurk true evil. Always ask yourself, who are you really listening to? A story from the past. Stay tuned. The second story is coming up and it will make you think even more. What are your thoughts on the first story? Let me know in the comments. I'm really curious to hear your opinion. On September 25, 2019, a man named Kim Tae-hoon returned to his home in the city of Dongducheon after a day's work. However, his wife, Jong Hae-seon, who typically greeted him at the door, was nowhere to be found. Sensing something was amiss, Kim Tae-hoon discovered a letter penned in his wife's handwriting. It was a daunting 9 pages long, filled with cryptic lines. As he read through them, he encountered a chilling phrase. By the time you read this, I am no longer here. I am no longer in this world. Alarmed by this message, Kim Tae-hoon immediately called the police and informed his wife's relatives about the situation. Was this a farewell note from Jong Hae-seon? Leaving behind a message hinting at a desire to depart for the next world, she vanished without a trace. The family searched every possible location she might have gone, but no signs of her were found. It was over a month later when the police, through surveillance cameras, determined that on the day of her disappearance, Jong Hae-seon had left their home and got into a taxi. The taxi headed towards the area of Mount Gamaksan, near the city of Paju. With no other leads to pursue, the police launched an extensive search around the vicinity of Gamaksan. This mountain, located in Gyeonggi Province on the border of the cities of Paju, Yangju, and Yeoncheon, is not particularly high and is quite popular among hikers. On November 14, 2019, a month and a half after her disappearance, the police, accompanied by search dogs, were scouring the mountain. Suddenly, one of the dogs started barking loudly as it approached a steep cliff, 50-60 meters off the trail. Concerned searchers rushed to the spot and soon discovered the severely decomposed body of a woman. Regrettably, it was Jong Hae-seon. Could she have taken a step toward the beyond on her own? To accurately determine the cause of death, it was decided that an autopsy would be conducted. Prior to this, as is customary in such cases, the family was asked to identify the body. Jong Hae-seon's husband and her mother arrived at the morgue, but a detective warned them that her face was severely damaged and advised against viewing it to avoid deep psychological trauma. Heeding the advice, the family decided to look only at the lower part of the body before leaving the morgue. On November 18th, 4 days after the body was discovered, the autopsy was performed. However, the police were unable to pinpoint the exact cause of death, officially stating that it remained unknown. This vague conclusion only raised more questions for the family. They began preparing for the funeral, but Jong Hae-seon's father couldn't come to terms with his daughter's sudden and mysterious passing. He requested 3 times to see her face before the farewell, but each time he was denied. Was her body truly that disfigured? Then, an unexpected revelation came from hospital staff. Jong Hae-seon's body was entirely missing its head. From the cervical section upward, it was absent. This revelation was a shock to the family, and they immediately halted the funeral preparations. How could anyone suggest an effort to leave this world when the body was missing its head? This pointed more likely to the possibility of murder. Why then was the police so eager to close the case as a bid to transition to the afterlife? The family's outrage had reached a breaking point. John Hyacinth's father called the detective, requesting photographs from the site where the body was discovered. However, the detective, showing clear discontent, suggested that the father come down to the station to view them in person. This only heightened the tension, and the father, his voice now raised, began demanding answers. How could my son-in-law identify the body and not notice that the head was missing? In defense, the detective claimed he had informed the son-in-law that the head was absent. When John Hyacinth's husband heard this, he objected. I was told that the face was severely damaged, but no one mentioned that her head was completely missing. The situation was becoming increasingly convoluted, prompting John Hyacinth's husband to decide to speak with the detective directly. The conversation was recorded, and in it, he insisted that the police continue searching for his wife's head, which was undoubtedly a logical demand. John Hyacinth's husband kept emphasizing that the priority was not to debate the existence of the head, but to urgently organize a search for it. However, the detective replied with dissatisfaction. "So, you want me to work for free and on my day off, no less?" Striving to remain calm, the husband once more attempted to explain that he was simply asking for their help. Is this not a situation where people should seek the assistance of the police? Yet the detective continued with irritation. "If I file a request, everything will be postponed until tomorrow. And right now, aside from me, no one knows the exact location of the crime scene." His displeasure was evident, further deepening the family's frustration. This behavior was far from what one would expect from an officer serving the community. Ultimately, the detective raised his voice. "I told you the body had no head. Why do you claim you didn't hear that?" In response, Keon Hyacinth's husband firmly stated, "I was told the face was severely damaged, but no one mentioned the complete absence of a head." At that moment, the argument intensified, and both sides began to clash. This behavior by the police became the subject of a major public scandal, sparking complaints filed through the National Information Portal. The family was convinced that if it had been known the body was missing its head, it would clearly point to murder, necessitating further investigation. There were suspicions that the police deliberately tried to avoid additional scrutiny to simplify their lives. However, the police claimed they informed the husband about the missing head out of respect for the family's feelings at the time of the autopsy. The police explained that it was raining at the time, and therefore they couldn't immediately continue the search, but promised to do so later. They asserted that the entire misunderstanding arose during the handover of the body to the family, and it was merely a miscommunication. But if I were in the family's shoes, simply brushing it off as a misunderstanding would have caused me serious indignation. Certainly, if this was an effort to leave this world, one could assume the body had lain there for a long time, and the head might have been damaged by wild animals. However, the autopsy found no evidence to support this. At the same time, no clear clues indicating murder were discovered either. The situation became so muddled that it could arouse suspicions that the police were hiding something. Yet concealing such a fact as the absence of a head would be impossible. After all, the autopsy was conducted by several people. The case had landed in the hands of detectives from the investigation department, and if murder had been suspected, it would have been transferred to the Serious Crimes Unit. This meant there was no reason to conceal anything within the same department. The day after Keon Hyacinth's husband spoke with the detective, the police initiated additional searches in the Gamoxin area. Fortunately, within just an hour, they found her head. It was almost entirely skeletonized. From the moment it became known that the head had separated from the body, it was clear that this case was anything but ordinary. The location where the head was found was only 150 meters from the body, which was incredibly close. But why hadn't it been discovered earlier? And how did it end up there? The strangest part was that the head somehow ended up at the bottom, as if it had rolled down the mountain. Could it have naturally rolled that distance? These questions remained unanswered. There was a theory that animals might have attacked the body. However, if that were the case, there would have been teeth marks on the bones, but the skull showed no signs of external damage. Another odd aspect was that although the body had been lying there for about 50 days, the skull was almost completely skeletonized, yet there wasn't a single hair left on it. Later, during an additional search, a strand of hair was found 20 meters from where the body lay, believed to belong to Keon Hyacinth. Piecing together all the findings, it could be concluded that the head was discovered 150 meters below the body, and the strand of hair slightly above that location. The picture was becoming increasingly convoluted. The police also noted that at the time of the body's discovery, it was late November, and the forest was covered with fallen leaves. However, the strand of hair wasn't hidden beneath the foliage, which also seemed strange. When Keon Hyacinth's body was first found, there were no personal belongings with it. But during subsequent searches, her bag was found 30 meters above the body's location. It was open, and several items, including credit cards, were missing. Surprisingly, the bag wasn't covered with fallen leaves either, despite the autumn season. And the oddities didn't end there. During the additional search, Cheon Hyeseon's phone was found not far from her body. Although the phone itself didn't provide any significant clues, analysis showed that it had last been turned off in a location roughly 8 kilometers from where the body was discovered. This added even more mysteries to the case. The case became so convoluted that it's unclear whether it should be classified as a typical criminal investigation or something entirely different. When considering the possibility of a voluntary step toward the beyond, there are two potential explanations. Some experts believe that if a very thin rope was used for hanging, the decomposition of the body could naturally cause the head to separate. However, the issue is that no rope or any other items that could have been used for such a departure from this world were found at the scene. Another theory is that Cheon Hyeseon might have slipped off a cliff or accidentally stumbled and fallen. The slope of the cliff where the body was discovered was around 80 degrees, and if she had indeed fallen, her clothing should have torn, and her body should have sustained multiple injuries. Yet the body was found in a surprisingly clean state, without signs of significant trauma. The family also asserts that Cheon Hyeseon was afraid of insects and never liked the mountains, making it unlikely that she would have chosen this method to depart for the next world. In the mountains she disliked. All of this fueled the family's doubts even further, leading them to believe that what happened didn't fit the narrative of a voluntary transition to the afterlife. There are far too many oddities for this case to be dismissed as a straightforward case of an effort to leave this world. Everything pointed towards a potential murder, and numerous questions arose. Who could have killed Jong Hyeseon and why? The police sent the discovered head back to the National Forensic Service for a second examination, while the family resumed funeral arrangements, opting to cremate the body. Maintaining the body in a frozen state was costly, and since an autopsy had already been conducted, the family deemed cremation appropriate. Sometime later, the results of the head's autopsy were released, but unfortunately, they provided no answers. The cause of death remained unclear. It was never determined why the head was severed or what exactly led to Jong Hyeseon's demise. Too many questions lingered unanswered. Some even suspected that the perpetrator might have been a family member. One factor fueling such suspicions was that after his wife's disappearance, Kim Tae-hoon meticulously cleaned the house, making it impossible to find any traces. He later removed all furniture and belongings, explaining it was necessary for a move. Although the police considered family members as suspects, they found no evidence to confirm their involvement. As I mentioned, this case seems shrouded in ambiguity. The police stated they had sufficient grounds to rule out the family as suspects, but justified it by citing protection of privacy, without disclosing details. Ultimately, the police, relying on a 9-page farewell letter, surveillance footage, and phone data, concluded that it wasn't murder and classified the case as a step toward the beyond. Reportedly, the family accepted this conclusion. But can we, knowing all the details, easily accept this verdict? The case of the headless body in Gamasan left too many questions. If Jong Hyeseon truly did not take a step toward the beyond, her tragedy might remain unsolved forever. What is the truth behind this case?